Okay. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started. On behalf of Pittsford Central PTSA, welcome to the 2025 Meet the Board of Education Candidates Forum. We're happy to be here tonight. My name is Colleen Emmons. I'm the interim coordinator of the event this year. We're really honored to be able to host this space and time to be able to meet and listen to the candidates who want to serve our children in our schools in such an important role. Welcome to our candidates, Ms. Emily Kay, Mr. David Burke, and Ms. Laura Schulitz. And welcome, a huge welcome, and thank you to Ms. Amy Thomas, Executive Director of the Monroe County School Board Association, and who is our moderator this evening. So with that, Amy, I welcome you to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Colleen, and welcome everybody who's here and those that are at home watching. And welcome to the Pittsford's Meet the Candidate event. Thank you all for being here this evening. A special thanks to the Pittsford PTSA, and in particular, Colleen Emmons, for organizing tonight's event, and to the Pittsford Technology team for ensuring this program reaches the broader community. We received quite a few questions from members of the community in such a short time frame, so I'd like to thank the community for your engagement. While we won't be able to address every single question that was submitted, we've done our best to group similar questions by topic. This way, we can cover as much ground as possible and provide a clearer sense of where each candidate stands on key issues. Before we begin with the candidates' opening statements, I'd like to take just a small moment to acknowledge the important work of our Board of Education members. As public servants, board members hold a critical role in upholding the public trust. While they're elected locally, their positions are nonpartisan and unpaid. Trustees dedicate hundreds of hours over the course of their term, not only attending meetings, but also engaging in ongoing learning. This includes at least 12 hours of mandatory professional development training during their first term, as well as developing a working knowledge of education law, school finance, state regulations, and the evolving landscape of federal and state mandates. In addition, board members are expected to remain visible and accessible, participating in district events, serving on committees, and staying engaged with the community. We sincerely thank tonight's candidates for stepping forward to serve Pittsford in this vital capacity. Now let's meet the individuals who are seeking to represent you on the Board of Education this year. Appearing in ballot order, they are Ms. Emily Kay, Mr. Dave Burke, and Ms. Laura Schulitz. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to deliver their opening statement. Following that, we'll move into the question and answer portion of the evening. We'll begin the first question with the candidate listed first on the ballot, being Emily. For each subsequent question, we'll rotate who answers first to ensure each candidate has the opportunity to lead off. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. If you need the question repeated, feel free to ask. Please be mindful of the timekeeper, so if you look to your right, Colleen will raise a yellow card when 30 seconds remain and a red card when time is up. To ensure fairness for all participants and clarity for our audience here at home, we'll strictly observe the time limits. We ask that you begin wrapping up your remarks once you see the yellow card. Okay, with that, we're going to begin with opening statements. So Emily, you're first up.
Hi. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Emily Kay. I've been on our board for 3 years now and would love to continue serving you for another term. I'm a proud product of our Pittsford schools, K through 12, and together with my husband, Andrew Kay, who's also a Sutherland graduate, I'm delighted to have 2 kids who now attend my old elementary school, Mendon Center, as well as one at Calkins Road. The first term on the Board of Ed always comes with a steep learning curve, but I've gone out of my way to get up to speed as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. I've been a member of our Monroe County School Board Association's committees on district operations, information exchange, and our legislative committee. I've also traveled to Albany 3 times to meet with our legislators and to speak with representatives of the governor's office and the state of education, as well as attended a number of other advocacy events. I've also been a member of our Teacher Center Policy Board here in Pittsford for 3 years, and I've been on our district's Community Outreach Committee for 2 years, and this year I volunteered to head up our newly restarted Policy Review Committee. Through these experiences, I've seen how Pittsford's unique culture of collaboration between teachers, parents, administrators, students, and the community has allowed us to maintain such a high standard of excellence over the years. During my first term in office, I had a lot of people ask me why I would want to frequently put myself in the line of fire for what's essentially a very intense, unpaid volunteer position. And the answer is simple: I'm fiercely protective of what we have here at PCSD. When I left our schools, I saw what an incredible advantage my Pittsford education was for me, and I feel passionately about ensuring that asset is passed down to every single kid who goes through our buildings. But a school district of Pittsford's caliber doesn't happen by just running on autopilot. It needs a constant stream of stakeholders who are committed to growing our standard of excellence in all areas for all kids. And in the coming years, I look forward to continuing to step up and help this district to create the most collaborative, supportive, and academically rigorous environment possible for our kids.
Thanks, Emily. Dave, your opening statement, please.
Thanks, Emily. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, PTSA, Amy Thomas, Colleen Emmons, our timekeepers. Appreciate you being here. I'm Dave Burke. I'm running also for re-election to my second term as a board member. 3 years ago, I presented at the candidates' night and shared that my professional experience qualified me for board service. I've had experience in business operations, finance roles, working with corporate boards, and had a good sense of what the role of governance is and was. And I thought there would be a lot of parallel with board work. I would say in retrospect, is really nothing can truly prepare you for board service. I had no idea what a tax certiorari is, and I still sort of don't. But there's a ton of surface area when you're on the board. I mean, it's everything from facilities to pedagogy to finance and ops and well beyond. And so there's so much to learn. And I think being 3 years in, I still feel like I'm just starting to kind of get my feet underneath me and feel confident in my role, what my role is, and I feel like I have a good sense of a lot of the different facets and aspects of our district. And so. For that, I'm really excited about the prospect of serving another 3 years so I can really bring that experience to bear. I think that's really important. Like Emily and many others, I have a vested interest in the community. I'm also a Sutherland grad, 2002, it's a very long time ago. Along with my wife, we have 2 children. Owen, my son's in first grade at Jeff Road. My daughter's in kindergartner next year at Jeff Road. So we want to see the schools continue to sort of thrive and grow, and the school's been a big factor that brought us back to Pittsford and Rochester. When I look around, I do think right now, we are at an inflection point. Across the district, we have lots of new faces in leadership roles, from our building leadership to athletics to our central office team, and so I think it's really important that we are able to invest in those leaders and make sure that those transitions continue to sort of drive the type of collaboration we've seen from the leaders we've had throughout the district over the years. And I think the board plays a really important role in that process. And so I think it's important for us to have a cohesive board, and I'm excited to be part of that. Finally, I think we're also facing a lot of uncertainty, both in terms of policy changes.
I'm going to have to interrupt you, Dave, because we've come to the end.
Sorry about that. Didn't time it well.
Okay, Laura?
Hi, and thanks to the Pittsford PTSA and Board of Education for the opportunity to join tonight's forum. I am Laura Schulitz. I also appreciate everyone who reached out to me, signed my petition when I announced my intention. My family has lived here in Pittsford for the last 14 years. My 2 older children are 2021 and 2022 graduates of Mendon High School, and my youngest will be a 2026 graduate. I hate to tell you, time flies. The most important aspect for me for joining the Pittsford Board of Education is our children and how they are navigating their way through school. Over the past 8 years, I've worked as a building substitute in all 9 of our buildings, and I've seen firsthand how the students are navigating their way through, and it's hard to be a kid. My concern is always, what do kids need and how can we help? I know as a member of the Board of Education, I can be the voice of children and ensure that they are heard. Parents, I know I need to hear your voices as well, but I want to make sure that kids are heard and valued. For kids, it is a very short time in their life, and I want to make sure that they're having an amazing experience. Recently, my husband and I started a boutique financial services company, Try9, and we are very excited, both for the company as well as the opportunity to have the time to volunteer and work in our community. I have been a member of the Girl Scouts of Western New York. I'm a past president of the Junior League, among other things. And I am just so happy to be here. Right time for me, right place. And I can't wait to help. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, we're going to move on to the question and answer portion of the evening. A reminder that answers should not exceed 2 minutes. When there are 30 seconds remaining, as it was in the opening statement, a yellow card will be shown, and start wrapping up your response, and then a red card will be shown. Feel free to ask any question. If you need a question repeated, I'm happy to repeat it for you. Okay, so for the first question, we're going to begin with Emily. What qualifications and experiences do you bring to the Board of Education, and how would you work to foster trust, collaboration, and transparency with fellow board members and the Pittsford community?
Thanks, that's a great question. I think I touched on my qualifications a little bit in my opening statement, but I wouldn't mind going in to a little bit more detail. I've spent a lot of time, I would say, over the past 3 years on the professional development aspect of this role. The committees that I've mentioned that I'm a part of for Monroe County School Boards, they meet 1 week a month, so that's 3 Wednesdays per month that I go in and for about an hour, listen to an expert come in and talk about a board-specific topic. It might be zero emissions buses, it might be capital improvement projects, it might be civil service changes in the requirements, it could be anything of the myriad of topics that Dave mentioned. And then we also hear from our fellow county school board members to see how they're handling that. That has been hugely beneficial in me feeling competent and qualified for this role. I also came into this role with what I would say is a varied background. I think also touching a bit on what Dave said, this isn't a role where you're expected to be or where you should be a subject matter expert. We have subject matter experts in our district. They are fantastic. We put a lot of effort into making sure that we have fantastic experts in these in our district. But you do need to be able to ask insightful questions and to understand a lot of different things that are put in front of you. And my background, was in English, foreign language, music instruction, literacy, as well as data analytics for 3 years. So I do feel, and law actually for a while, but I do feel prepared to be able to look at a lot of things. In terms of fostering trust, I do want to touch on that, even though I only have a few seconds. I think the best thing we can do is to listen and to assume good intentions from each other and to bring good intentions, right? I feel strongly that our central office team, our administrators, our teachers, everyone in our schools, as well as our board members, are coming from a place of wanting to help the children, and that is really what builds the foundation of trust.
Thanks, Emily. Dave, same question?
I will reiterate a lot of what Emily said, which is, at the end of the day, particularly, we're not meant to be subject matter experts. We have those. The role of a board member is the role of governance, which is to be able to think really critically about the big picture for the school and to be able to kind of dive into those details when and where you need to in response to challenges that the school's facing at any given time. And I think it goes back to also you don't need that subject matter expertise. In the same way we teach kids how to learn, as board members, we have to ask really good questions. We have to dig in deep when and where there's an issue that needs our attention. And then we also have to be able to trust the leaders in the district, particularly our central office team, to be able to make the right decisions and the right calls and back them up on that. Right? When we see that things aren't working, we need to dig in and better understand where there's opportunities for improvement. But by and large, our job is to really support cohesive leadership amongst the central office team, as well as to continue to make sure that we are making decisions as a function of our values and our mission. I think being guided by our values, particularly when we have a diversity of perspectives and opinions on the board, and a lot of times we'll have hard conversations, those are collaborative and productive because we can stay focused on both the kids and the values that drive our district.
Thanks, Dave. Laura, same question?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What qualifications and experiences do you bring to the Board of Education? How would you work to foster trust, collaboration, and transparency with fellow board members and the Pittsford community?
Okay, thank you. Sorry. So for me, I am coming off the board of the Girl Scouts of Western New York. I've been involved in many other organizations, the junior leagues, the GVPTA, the PTSA. I'm on the district planning team, so scenario planning team. So I've been very involved in our community as well as our schools. So I think my qualifications speak for themselves. I've just been very involved. I've had multiple positions. And as far as transparency is concerned, I think we could do here a better job of transparency. I went through the minutes for the last year, and I had a really, really tough time figuring out what was going on a little bit. And I was in some of these meetings, and I was very involved. So I would think if we could work a little harder on that transparency, I think that would be better for our kids and for our families. The most important thing I always say is our kids and what they need. So if they need a field trip, how do we get that to them and how do we make that happen? And I would love the opportunity to be able to do that as well. So qualification-wise, I've been very involved in a lot of things. If anyone would like to see my resume, it's crazy. But it's, I'm at a point where this is what I need to do, and this is where I would like to be. And I have a great affinity for our schools and our school district. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. For the next question, we'll begin with Dave. What are the most significant challenges facing the Pittsford Central School District in the next 3 to 5 years, and how would you prioritize and address them?
Thanks, Amy. Great question. So I think one of the first things I would talk about is, as I mentioned in my intro, we have a lot of new leadership. And at the end of the day, we need to make sure that all of our leaders across different aspects of the district are working together cohesively, they feel supported, they've got that professional development they need to step into those roles. So I think that's a core, not necessarily a challenge, because I think we have a lot of confidence in our leaders, but it's an opportunity for us to make that investment and really set them up for success. I think beyond that, we're dealing with some bigger issues that are outside of our control. Well, we can control how we react to them, but ultimately there's a lot of sort of choppy waters that we need to navigate. The first I would say is broadly meeting our budget, right? We have a $150 million annual budget. 70% of that comes from the tax levy in our community. And so we haven't historically been able to lean on foundation aid too much, but we're even becoming, it's even more challenging for us to get the aid that we need. And we're really, really fortunate to have some very capable, experienced people that are helping us navigate how we can be really resourceful and thoughtful, both in the money we spend and in how we get aid for a lot of different aspects. So I think that is hugely important. At the end of the day, we have to balance the budget every year. The next I would say is we are still navigating, I think, some really difficult waters in terms of, there are questions about policy. What are our policies going to be? We're getting a lot of mandates now at the federal level that are that we're going to have to react to and figure out how we're going to respond to that. And the last one I would say is we are still in a difficult macro environment where interest rates are still really high and prices are really high. And so that goes back to how are we going to balance our budgets? How are we going to make sure that we're delivering the services we need to our kids? So I think those are the high-level challenges.
Thanks, Dave. Laura, same question.
Well, thank you. For me, and I'm sort of on the outside because I'm not part of the board, significant challenges I feel really are transparency. Once again, I went through a year's worth of minutes, and I had a really tough time figuring what was going on. So I want to make sure that our students, our families, our stakeholders know what's going on as far as the district is concerned. So that would be one challenge. A second challenge would be, in the nicest way, keeping our kids happy. I don't know who has walked through a building or talked to kids, but our high school kids, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of, not drama, but it's more internal trauma. So they're upset, they're worried, they're, what about my future? What can I do? What's coming around the corner for me next? And if you just stop and you talk to a kid, sometimes you can steer them in the right direction or whatever. So for me, that would be our challenge, or one of our major challenges, is how we sort of manage those kids who are our stakeholders. But I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura. Emily?
Thanks. I agree with a lot of what Dave said about the making sure that our budget is sustainable, especially when you're looking at a 3 to 5 year time horizon. Sustainable budget is huge. I do think another huge thing that wasn't touched explicitly on is mental health. We're in a mental health crisis in our country, and it bears out in our schools. I think that some of the things that we've been looking at are good starts to trying to address it here. Obviously, it's a large societal problem, and so we're not going to be able to fix it in isolation. But our culture of collaboration in Pittsford has at least allowed us to put in a partnership with Pittsford Youth Services, partnerships with Golisano, build teams around kids that touch with both their mental health providers and their teachers and their families. And I think that building this up and building these programs up will be very helpful. Something that I almost think of, if you think of it like an MTSS model, the tier 1 support, something that should maybe help a little bit all of the kids, might be the cell phone policy things that we're looking at. There's a lot of research around how this is tied to our kids' poor mental health, and we can't solve smartphones in general, but we can give them a break from it during the day. Another thing that sort of goes on the other side of the spectrum for kids who can't get to school because their mental health struggles are so severe. I think our tutoring center has been a fantastic addition during the time that I've been on the board, giving those kids a place where they can still receive instruction even if they're having severe troubles and they're not falling completely behind. But I do think that's it's been building, especially coming out of COVID, and I don't see it resolving itself anywhere in the next 3 to 5 years.
Thanks, Emily. For the next question, we'll begin with Laura. If you could make one immediate improvement to the Pittsford Central School District, what would it be and why?
Yes. So I'm sorry, my name's Laura Schulitz, and my name has fallen, so that's okay. I would think one significant challenge. Was that the question, significant challenge?
One immediate improvement.
Okay. So for me, an immediate improvement, and I'm not privy to some of the information, would be how our children are allowed to sort of vote and participate in the processes that directly affect them. I would love them to be able to, even if it's a collection box or something, have the ability to say, this is what bothers me and this is what I need to be fixed. I would say that would be sort of my immediate challenge. Thank you.
Emily?
I think a couple of things. One, I think that that's a really great point. And I do think New York State has mandated that there's going to be a student member on the board. We're going to have one from Pittsford Sutherland and Pittsford Mendon. That's a change that's coming right up down the pike. So I'm very excited about that because I do think that that's a great change. I think, if I could immediately put my finger on one big looming issue that we have, then we would probably have a lot of structural issues in our district. But I think something that's sort of a low-hanging fruit that would be nice to see is if we could engage the media for some more positive press about ourselves. I think we do tend to be a little bit gun-shy in engaging the media, and we have so many wins and so many successes here in Pittsford, and I think that being able to celebrate those publicly a little bit more would go a long way for morale.
Thanks, Emily. Dave?
I would hire 100 bus drivers. I mean, we have a transportation issue, right? And we're actually looking at that now, which is fantastic. And I think, we're looking at that holistically, trying to figure out routes. And we have a mandate to make sure not just kids in our schools, but broadly in our district are making it to school. And we also, that's another area where we want it to be equitable. Different kids have different lengths of rides, and we're also just consistently understaffed on bus driving. So I think it's a challenge. We're not alone in facing that, but I mean, if there was, one immediate issue that I could just fix right there, it would absolutely be that.
I just have to pick up your name tag because it's bothering me. You always have a technical glitch in some way, form, or fashion. So now we're all set. No fans, nothing. Okay, next question. We'll begin with Emily. How will you advocate for all students, including high-ability learners, students with disabilities, and students with behavioral challenges, and ensure their individual needs are met?
That's a great question. And I think that the truest answer is honestly the most obvious one, which is that you need to listen to the families, you need to listen to the students to find out what those individual needs are and to be able to address them in a way that's going to work for that child. I think that, creating systems is also going to be very valuable, especially when you have kids with similar needs, right? When I hear about gifted education, I know the instructional challenge program is such a huge benefit for those kids, and they could just be given a more difficult worksheet in the classroom, they could just be assigned a harder book, but being able to meet and see other peers who are facing both, that have both the same interests and strengths, but also some of the same weaknesses and challenges as they do, really goes a long way towards not having those kids feel isolated and feel singled out.
Dave, same question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, I was just going back to our mission, vision, and values, and right in there is personalizing our education, right? I think it starts with that. I actually believe as a district, we have prioritized in our vision that our educational path for students is going to be personalized. So it starts there. That's what we are always striving toward. How do we continue to support and enable that? I agree with what Emily said. I think first and foremost, we have to listen and understand both students and families and our teachers and our staff what students need. In many cases, it's not always that, it could be a teacher who knows best what students need. And so we really need to always be listening and make sure that we have those channels for that communication to be moving up and down the organization, which today I think we do a good job of, but we could always do better. I think the other piece there is support, which in reality oftentimes means funding, right? It means having the resources to be able to provide that level of support. We just went through something where we're bringing a PT and an OT in-house to the district, which is the right decision for us at this time. So it is about being able to make those trade-offs, and I think that's one of the hardest things on the board is we have to make trade-offs, right? There's a finite amount of resources. We all absolutely want to support all of our kids in the way that they need to be supported, but we have to make those hard decisions about when and where we can bring in the resources to help the most kids. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Laura?
So I am a huge advocate of the kids, but I think it's really, really hard to put all of the kids in the same box because every kid is different. And in order to meet individual needs, you cannot lump all of the kids together. So we have to think of the kids individually and figure out what's going to be best for them, as opposed to seriously putting them in the same box. So you can advocate for all students, but not all students are the same. So I think we would need to really, really look at what those different, in the nicest way, boxes would be and where different kids would fall. as opposed to, oh, this kid could be this or this could be that. But I think the kids are so individual that they would need individual plans, and that might allow them to crisscross with other kids from that have different needs than them. But it allows kids to be kids, as opposed to putting them all in that same box. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, the next question, Dave, you'll start us out. Given the national shortage of special education providers, teachers, related support staff, what strategies would you support to ensure Pittsford consistently delivers all mandated IEP services throughout the school year?
That's a great question. Kind of ties right back into what we were just discussing, which is, ultimately, so first and foremost, I actually think Pittsford has one of the best programs to support students with IEPs. Many, many people move to this district just for that program, that ability. So I would say out of the gate, I'm just really proud of what we achieve already. Obviously, there's always more we can do. I think specifically talking about shortages, we're experiencing labor shortages everywhere. My comment about bus drivers. It's really hard to find the people that we need, and there's a lot of competition across other districts. And so, unfortunately, we do operate in a labor marketplace, right? There is supply and demand, and the best way to get more people is to pay more money. So I think we have to continually look at that. Again, places where we find creative ways to save money, that money gets reallocated to places like this, right? And so that's part of the bigger picture is how do we really be thoughtful about really saving every cent, identifying unique ways to create more revenue. We made a lot of money this year just off short-term interest on our budget, like $700,000. That money can actually be reallocated to efforts like this. And so I think that's a big piece of it. And then, we also have to have a really good recruiting program. Which we do. We've got a great HR team. We do a very good job of recruiting, and I think we've also consistently built a great reputation as an employer in Rochester, certainly in kind of the Western New York area. And so I think that goes a long way as well to getting us more people, even when, maybe if you're a physical therapist and you've got two opportunities in front of you, if the compensation is about the same, but, a brand like Pittsford, you're like, this is a better place to work. That's what's going to swing the needle in our direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Laura?
This is a tough question. Because I think when it comes to special education providers, there seems to be a disconnect in how much they're getting paid in the nicest way. You have members who are one-on-one who are getting paid $20,000 a year. And I worry that is becoming the norm. And I would love for sort of a raise in that for those folks to allow them to sort of better balance their personal lives and their work lives. Our kids deserve so much more sometimes than we are able to give them. And the shortage of providers, I think, has a lot to do with salary. And I'm just kind of disappointed in that. And I think we could do better. And I think we should do better because you have a provider that's making $25,000 a year. And as much as that sounds great, that's hard. It's hard to live that way. So I would love more training. I would love all of those other things, but I think it does have to do with salary and money. And I think there's the ability in our budget to make sure that we are compensating those very special people the right way. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Emily?
I agree. This is a hard question. I echo what Dave says. I think that the recruiting is very important, and I do think that we do a very good job of it here in Pittsford. I also think that the pipeline isn't there, so it's not just a struggle that we're seeing in terms of finding special ed providers. It's all around, right? I think that when we can have these services in-house, then it does make it more reliable for our kids. It's more, if when we brought in the OT and the PT positions, right, we know that we're going to have that person to be able to provide those services for our kids. But I do also think that when we can't do that, our ability to contract with BOCES is huge, and they do have very strong, very reputable providers. We're just sharing them with other people in the county, which also reminds me of the push that is coming down from the state towards a regional sharing of services when it makes sense, right? There's the state has been trying to get regions on board with seeing ways that they can work together to fill gaps, because we are all in this labor shortage together. So I think that it's probably something that's worth us looking into. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, the next question. Laura, you'll begin with this one. As a board member, how would you balance fiscal responsibility to taxpayers with the district's legal and ethical obligation to provide high-quality services for all students?
First and foremost, transparency. A family or a taxpayer is more likely to participate if they know what's going on and what their money is going towards. I think, as I said, as I went through some of these minutes, I've been doing PTSA for 14 years. I had a tough time figuring out what was going on and where we are going. And my name fell again. But I think in order to balance, it's just like any organization, any business, you have to look at each and every line item and figure out what you're spending money on and why. It's very difficult, and it takes a whole lot, and there might be some programs that might not be necessary any longer, unfortunately. But it is what we have to do in order to ensure, because if we go over the tax cap, then most likely the vote's not going to be with us, so we won't be able to move forward. So we want to make sure that there's a good balance there, and I think that's what I think. So thank you.
Emily, same question.
Yeah, thank you. I do take our responsibility to taxpayers very seriously, and I think that our district does as well. Not for nothing, although we are the most affluent community in our county, our student spend is always right in the middle. And in terms of, for example, our administrative budget is one of the leanest in the county. And then when we needed to make budget cuts this year, we still managed to find room in that administrative budget to make cuts. So I have the feeling that people take their responsibility to taxpayers very seriously. I also think that they take their responsibility to kids very seriously. When we saw this looming tax cut that was going to be needed this year, in a huge feat of collaboration, our internal units, the PDTA, the PTSA, all of our internal units were asked to identify within their own unit where they thought that they could make cuts without touching the kids, without taking away programming from the kids, and without requiring layoffs. And they stepped up and did that. It would have been very easy to become defensive and close the ranks, but I think everybody had the kids' best interest at heart, and was able to help make those hard decisions collaboratively. I also, what really stands out to me as well from this budget season is the advocacy campaign that our community stepped up to do. We asked and ended up receiving a 3% increase from the state. And I have to say, our Pittsford community was so enthusiastic in asking our legislators for this increase that when I was meeting with one of the legislators, they jokingly begged us to stop having people send them letters, because they were getting flooded daily with letters from Pittsford community members and parents. So I do think that that's a huge, huge win on our part.
Thanks, Emily. Dave?
Would you repeat the question?
I sure will. As a board member, how would you balance fiscal responsibility to taxpayers with the district's legal and ethical obligation to provide high-quality services to all students?
Yeah, thanks. So I think that question actually suggests that the two are not necessarily, it's one versus the other, right? How do you balance these two things? I would actually say they are virtuous and they support each other. There's a community together, they did a research project and basically found that 70 cents on the dollar of a school budget goes back into that community, right? So in many ways, our school is supporting our community. And so by delivering educational services, we are, meeting the financial responsibility, the fiscal responsibility that we have to our taxpayers. And I do think, going back to Emily's point, look at any metric across all of the districts in Monroe County, and Pittsford is consistently delivering one of the best educational services at the lowest possible cost relative to everybody else in the district on almost every single metric. And I think that's only something you develop over a long period of time of having consistent, stable leadership, having boards that support the superintendent. You look at our superintendent, he's been in the role 15 years. The average in the country is 4 years, not even, it's 3.5 years. When you have that high level of turnover, you cannot even begin to do things like long-range financial planning. You can't think about where you're gonna be in 5 years, much less where you're gonna be in 5 months when you have constant turnover across the board, across the central office team. You're gonna lose teachers and talent. And so I actually think that fiscal responsibility that we have has had a huge impact on our ability to deliver educational services. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. For the next question, we'll begin with Emily again. What role should the Board of Education play in ensuring students have access to nutritious, healthy meals, and how would you approach this responsibility?
That's a great question. I think we're really unique in Pittsford because we are not part of the federal lunch program. We run our own in-house lunch program, which does give us more latitude. And I think the reason that decision was made was because what we saw was the strings that came with the federal program, the food that we were mandated to serve was not actually being eaten by the children. And getting nutritious meals for our kids also means that it has to be something that our kids are going to eat. I think that has been serving us well, and that tweaks can always be made, and they can be made with more agility if we have our in-house service than if we are doing federal funding. Now, the one monkey wrench in the works here is that New York State wants to fund, universally fund free meals, which would be fantastic, although part of their program depends on the federal funding coming through for those universal meals, and that's a little bit up in the air right now. So I do think that if we were able to have the opportunity to have universal free meals for all of our kids, then it might be worth looking at what we're doing and seeing if the differences that we're able to implement as a district are, balance them against the benefits that would be having all of our kids be able to access free meals when they're hungry.
Thanks, Emily. Dave?
Can you repeat that question again, too?
I sure will. What role should the Board of Education play in ensuring students have access to nutritious, healthy meals, and how would you approach this responsibility?
Yeah, great. So, yeah, I think there's two key factors here. One is the nutrition and the quality of our food. I know when I was in grade school, it was like Cisco and milk in a bag. So I'm really glad that we have prioritized nutritious, high-quality food. And to Emily's point, part of the reason we're not in the federal program, or the state program for that matter, is because it tied our hands on quality of food. So we have prioritized that, and I think that's absolutely the right thing for us to be prioritizing. And Emily called out another piece of this, which is that it changes, right? This is always changing. So we have to stay on top of if it makes sense from a nutrition and economic standpoint for us to actually shift into the state or federal level program, then that's a decision we'll make at that time. And I know that came up this year, and we were looking at that. So yeah, I'm really supportive of the decisions we've made around our lunch program. Also, our lunch program breaks even. On month over month, you'll look at it. Sometimes it makes a profit. Sometimes it makes a loss. Mike Vespe's really happy when it makes a profit. But generally speaking, it breaks even. So it's not like it's a profit center for us where we're trying to make a lot of money by selling junk food to our kids, right? It's really, first and foremost about, quality food and nutrition.
Thanks, Dave. Laura?
So a few years ago, the if I remember correctly. We left the federal program because it was something Mrs. Obama had brought in, and it was just a little too restrictive for us and our kids. It was a very long time ago. So for our kids, all of our kids should have nutritious meals, but they are not going to eat them. So for me, it's a grab and go kind of thing. It's a cereal in the morning. It's fruit or snacks in the afternoon, because a lot of the food goes to waste if you spend any time in any of the buildings. Luckily, if you haven't opened it, you can put it in a bin that can be shared. But for the most part, a lot of the food gets thrown out from kids who are purchasing lunch, and that's very unfortunate. And it's also hard to see if you've ever been in the lunchroom during a lunch period. So I would lean more towards grab and go, and as opposed to sort of a federal mandate, because I don't believe our kids would be receptive to that. Our parents would, but our kids would be like, what is this and why do I have to eat this? So I would love sort of to spend some time in the cafeterias with the kids and see what they're actually eating and what they're bringing, and come up with a plan that would be more something that the students would be more behind, as opposed to some of the kids who are just forced to have like this lunch that might not be what they want. So, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Laura. The next question will begin with Dave. With growing concern about the effects of personal technology on student focus and well-being, what is your position on managing cell phone use in schools?
Great question. I think at a high level, we can't get rid of technology. So we have to figure out, how do we teach our kids to have a healthy relationship with technology, which also requires us as adults to have a healthy relationship with technology, which is something I know we're also navigating. I think the number one opportunity we have is to have a consistent and well-defined policy as it relates to cell phones. And we've had a lot of conversations around that, and we're also navigating kind of what New York State's mandate is going to be on that, as well as kind of what we think. And also, it's not just about what the board thinks, it's about what the community thinks, and trying to sort of navigate that. And so I think, one, at a high level, it has to be consistent. It has to be thoughtful and pragmatic, right? One of the things that recently came up is just the fact that there's so much coordination for after-school activities, and so it's a huge burden on parents for the kids not to have any access to a phone throughout the day entirely. So we have to be thinking about pragmatically what's going to work for our community. How do we try and minimize the usage as much as possible, and also kind of take that desire to use it away through different kind of mechanisms. And then we have to be really, really consistent and clear in the policy and just communicate that. It also does, we also need to be thoughtful that it's very different what cell phone usage looks like for a high schooler than an elementary school kid, right? And so we have to be thoughtful about that as well. So there's a lot of pieces to think about and navigate, and we have, clear perspectives on that. But I think we do need to make that next step of establishing that policy and implementing it and seeing it through.
Thanks, Dave. Laura, same question.
So I made a comment one year that cell phones are the end of dinner what cigarettes used to be. You finish your dinner, you whip out your cell phone, and you see what's going on in the world. And back in the day, in the 60s and the 50s, they would smoke. Not that I'm promoting smoking in any way, shape, or form, but it's kind of that addiction that is really hard to break for me, and I think each family is different as to what they allow. Can a cell phone be in your bedroom at night? Does it have to be in the kitchen? Where does it have to be? But I also know that I know when my high schooler has a break, so I can text her, like, don't forget you have to do this thing. And I can send her this text in between periods, because I know in my brain when that is, so I can tell her something. And I think we as parents, especially since COVID, and most definitely since Sandy Hook, we have been we need to have sort of that touch on our kids. We need to know that they're okay. We need to know that we can sort of grab onto them and that they are safe. And I know that kids do dumb things, and they take photos in bathrooms, and they do all sorts of other really, really ridiculous things. But as a parent, it is really important to be able to have that touch point with that child, especially just based on the way that the world has been. So taking those phones away and not allowing them, I think, would be more detrimental to the kids than anything else that we would do for them. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Emily, same question.
Thanks. I think a lot of good points have been brought up here. I think that the education piece, having our kids understand just really what smartphones, everything about smartphones, what the potential dangers are, what the potential upsides are, understanding everything in the context of no matter what our decision is huge. I will just say personally, I had my middle schooler read The Anxious Generation because this is a topic of conversation among him and his peers, and I thought it was valuable for him to start looking at it from a research-based rather than an I want-based viewpoint. I will say for where our policy ends up, for me, one of the huge points is that I want the onus off the teachers in terms of enforcing this. They cannot teach while trying to take away a cell phone from a child, and they shouldn't be put in that position. And I also don't feel like they should be on the front lines of having to manage with families if the families have different ideas of what cell phone use should be allowed than the teacher or the administration or the district does. I personally think that a distraction-free environment for our kids is non-negotiable. I think that our kids need to be able to have the same advantage that we had to be able to give 100% of their focus when they're in class to the class that they are in. I definitely appreciate the concerns about, worst case scenario type things, but I think that I worry sometimes that we are prioritizing our own anxiety as adults over what's actually best for the children. And specifically in this scenario, numbers of groups of emergency responders have come out and saying that kids having cell phones is more dangerous than kids not having cell phones in this scenario. They will miss life-saving instructions when they are trying to touch base with their parents. And if a lot of kids are trying to do this, it also risks jamming up the emergency responders.
Thanks, Emily.
Okay, yep, receiving what they need. Thanks.
The next question, we'll begin with Laura. What is your position on book bans or content restrictions in schools? Under what circumstances, if any, should the Board of Education consider the removal of specific materials?
So, I don't agree with book bans or content restrictions at all. It reminds me of a place and time that we are no longer in. And I think it should be up to the teachers who are teaching a text or whatever that is that they're working on, should have the ability to use any kind of book that they want. A parent can decide that their kid may not participate, and I do understand that. But I also do not agree in banning books in any way, shape, or form. I think if a book is out there and it has been published, there is a reason for it. So, yeah, I don't know how I would handle that on a board. We'd have to look at it. But if it is a book that is available, then I think our kids should have the ability to look at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Emily.
Yeah, so if you attended a board meeting at some point last year, you probably can guess where as a board we are on this topic. It was very hot in our boardroom here in public comment. And I am not for banning books. I believe our controversial materials policy was something that we worked on quite a bit last year. We started with what we thought was a good starting point. And as we sort of saw how it played out and we received more feedback, we ended up amending this, I think, 3 times because we really want to get it right. And I think what we settled on in its present position is, really the heart of what most people want, which is that families might have the right to restrict their own kids' access to materials, but they don't have the right to restrict other kids' access to materials, and other people like community members or other kids' parents also don't have the right to restrict your kids' access to materials. So I think it's also really, it's really important to us. We have fantastic experts in our librarians in our schools. And we, currently have our ASI working very closely with our library standards leader to make sure our experts in Pittsford are putting their eyes on all of our books, and they're making the decision. This is age appropriate. This is valuable. This is something that our kids are really going to benefit from having in the library. So, we're not just receiving shiploads of books that nobody has looked at. An expert has decided this is valuable to have. And I think that that's a great development that's continuing now.
Thanks, Emily. Dave?
Yeah, I'll tack onto a lot of that, which is basically one, I trust in our librarians. They are specialists in this. They make decisions based on a set of criteria about which books are in our libraries, right? So I have great faith and trust in their decision making. Similarly, I have great faith and trust and support in our teachers who decide which materials they're going to teach in their classroom. Now, to Emily's point, and Laura's point as well, obviously, sometimes that might not coincide with what a family wants taught, right? And we need to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. Finally, I have a lot of support and confidence and trust in our process for evaluating materials that maybe shouldn't be required in classes or in the library. That process is very well defined. It's incredibly thorough. Multiple people are involved and spend actually a lot of time reading every single page of those materials. And ultimately, the onus is, does this have educational value? Which I think is also the right kind of heuristic and criteria for determining if those materials should stay in the library or in the syllabus. And so this is a very clearly well-defined process, and I'm very supportive of it.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, on to the next question. We're going to begin with Emily. How would you approach evaluating and responding to recent changes in federal education policy and their potential impact on Pittsford schools?
Yeah, that's a big one. And I think right now, to say that anyone has the answer on this is overshooting your confidence here. Everything, it is constantly in flux. I think that one of the things that has been pretty helpful for our board currently in evaluating what's going on at a federal level has been talking to our partners in Monroe County and talking to the other board members and their administrative teams and sort of seeing what they are seeing in their buildings, what they're hearing in their communities, if they have any information we don't. I think, beyond that, all we can do is continue to keep ourselves centered on our mission, vision, and values and make decisions every day that are best for our kids. And, we control what we can control. We don't control what we don't control. That's the end of the story.
Thanks, Emily. Dave?
Yeah, I think we have to navigate these, right? To Emily's point, we absolutely need to lean into our council and our groups like BOCES that give us guidance and support us on how we should think about this. Also the guidance from New York State Department of Education. A lot of this is coming from the U.S. Department of Education, and it goes back to one of the core challenges I talked about earlier, which is whether you like or don't like which policies are coming through, it creates uncertainty. It creates a tremendous amount of thrash and work for our district. And so the board needs to navigate that and try and minimize the impact of that as much as possible, while also having to make hard decisions. And I do think these are actually going to be some of the hardest decisions we've had to make as a board when we really think critically about what's the right call on these policies, because there is no, good, there's no good decision on either side, unfortunately. So it's frustrating, actually, and it's a real challenge.
Thanks, Dave. Laura?
So I think whenever there's a new president of the United States, there are always changes in policies. And we need to do our best to ensure that we evaluate those changes and do what's best for our students. Even if it's at a federal level, we do have the ability to support our students locally and allow them to grow and to flourish under whatever that is, because it might change again in 4 years, or it might change again in 8 years. So I'm not privy to some of the information, I think, but I think it is really important to work with our students to ensure that they have what they need, and then we will figure out how we can roll in those federal policies. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. For our final question, this is where you breathe heavily. For our final question, we'll begin with Dave. One key responsibility of the Board of Education is hiring and evaluating the superintendent. What qualities and leadership traits do you believe are most important in the role of a superintendent for the Pittsford Central School District?
Yeah, great question. So I think when you're evaluating a candidate for any role, you need to look at two things. You need to look at skills and you need to look at behaviors. So skills are the experiences they've had. We need people who understand what it means to operate in this type of environment, in that type of a role. Behaviors, those are intrinsic oftentimes. It's what you look for in almost somebody's personality, right? And so I think to consider a candidate for that role, the skills, you have to check those off. It's binary. They sort of have those experiences or they don't. When it comes to behaviors, I think probably the single biggest thing is that sort of collaborative attitude, right? Like, they have to work with so many different stakeholders across so many different facets of the community. And their ability to do that and their ability to enjoy that, I think, is really important, because for some folks, it's not necessarily fun. And as a superintendent, you have to do that all day, every day. So I think that's a huge factor that we look for. I think the second piece I look for is really like stamina. I mean, just, watching Mike Bureau, I mean, it is a very, very demanding job. There's no question. It is not a 9-to-5. You are spending, probably 80 hours a week, honestly. I get emails at 2 a.m. or something. It's crazy, right? So you need somebody who has an incredible investment in the community, a desire to do that job, a willingness to really put that job in the community first, which I think is super important. I could probably keep going on, but I think those are the big ones I would focus on.
Thanks, Dave. Laura.
So I've worked with Mr. Pirro for a very, very long time, 14 years, through the different groups that I've been involved with in the building. And so I've watched, take a step back and you watch. And you look at the qualities and you learn that golf is the greatest thing in the whole world, because it allows him to relax and do whatever it is that he needs to do. The hardest part, I think, of hiring and evaluating a superintendent is, how is that person going to fit into our culture? And I think that's with any hire that you have, or any new hire, is always, how will that person fit and what will they change? Having been on sort of both sides of that, I think it's very, very difficult. I am a big fan of his, and I'm afraid that they're telling me something that I don't know. But I think it is very important for that person to be cool, calm, and collected, and have a good head on their shoulders, and for us as a Board of Education to know that that person is someone that we can work with for a very long time. And I have personally worked with Mr. Pirro for about 14 years, sort of through PTSA on in these background roles, and I do know sort of what an amazing and different character he is, and I don't know that he would be easily replaced, but I am, yes, so I would say it's going to be a slow process. That is all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura. Emily?
I mean, I have to reiterate what both of these people have said, that we have been so fortunate to have Mike Pirro, to see over the past 14 years what an exemplary superintendent looks like in a district. One of the things I think that has always really impressed me about Mike Pirro is his foresight. He is able to see what is going to come down the pike before almost anyone, I think, and to see what's going to become an issue in our community. And that allows him to have the time to invest in the collaboration that our district is so well known for. It gives us lead time to spend months and sometimes a year or more discussing with our different stakeholders something that can, might, and then inevitably does surface in the future. I think beyond that, you can't overstate that it needs to be somebody who puts kids first and who is able to build trust and is able to be trusting in our community, and is able to always project good intentions and assume good intentions. It needs to be somebody who can listen well, work with divergent viewpoints. It's somebody who's going to see families on their best day and their worst day in the school district. And it needs to be somebody who not only is able to handle that large range of emotions, but somebody who relishes that part of the job. And I think it also just needs to be somebody who truly loves the job and our community. We have something really unique here in Pittsford, and if the person who holds that role doesn't value it as much as every member of our community, then this just isn't going to work. So,
Thanks, Emily. So we have reached the end of our question and answer portion of the program, and it's time now for our closing statements. As I indicated earlier, each candidate will now have up to 2 minutes, once again, to make your closing statement. The statements will be given in the reverse ballot order, so we will begin with Laura.
Hi, all. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak this evening. Thank you to Amy Thomas, the technology team, PTSA, everyone that was involved today. I am committed to Pittsford and the Board of Education. I would like to ensure that all of our students have an amazing experience and their voices are heard. Overall, it is a privilege to volunteer, and I feel this is an amazing opportunity to help our kids. I have led the Girl Scouts of Western New York, the Junior League of Rochester, as well as the PTSA, so this isn't new to me, but I look forward to the opportunity of serving our community. And the Board of Education is so very important to me because I would like the legacy to move on. So I'm hoping, if you are so inclined, that you vote for me on May 20th. Thank you very much and have a great night.
Thanks, Laura. Dave.
I'll reiterate the thanks that Laura gave to everybody for making this possible. And great questions from the community and for everybody watching. Thank you for taking the time to watch this and actually, pay attention and be invested. I think serving on the board over the last 3 years has been, really a great honor for me. It's been an incredible learning experience and something I've really valued. And it's been incredible to be able to invest my time and effort in our district in that way. And so, kind of reflecting back on some of the things we've talked about, I do think we are at a challenging point. I don't want to say it's more challenging than since the pandemic, but I do think in many ways there are a lot of real challenges the district is facing today. And so I think over the next 3 years, which is the next board term, it's really important that we continue to invest in leadership, that we have strong leadership to guide the school community through these challenges. And where I've seen that work over the last 3 years is by having a diversity of perspectives and, not having that turn into conflict, but actually turn into kind of a collaborative process where we make really good decisions, right? It hones that decision making, and that's kind of the dynamic I've experienced on the board so far. And so, I think when I reflect on why do I want to run again, I think it's one, to bring those learnings I've had to bear, but also too because I feel that that dynamic is good, and I'm a part of that dynamic, and I want to continue to keep that intact and do the best that we can to ensure that we do the best for our kids and our community over the next few years. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Emily?
Yep, I think we can't close this out without thanking the District PTSA for hosting this event, especially Kristen Hans, the president, and Colleen Emmons, the Meet the Candidates coordinator and our past president, for putting all this together. Thank you to Amy for moderating, and to everyone else behind the scenes who made the live streaming happen. I also want to thank the PDTA for their endorsement. The support of our incredible educators really means so much to me. And finally, I would also like to thank all of the people who have reached out to me over the past 3 years with their questions, concerns, and sometimes difficulties with the district. I know I can't always give you the answer that you want to hear, but I do want you to know that your input really matters, and that I do share it with the rest of the board and our administration, and that oftentimes your feedback will stay with us and influence our decision-making long after you've shared it. I hope over the course of this evening and over the course of the past 3 years that I've been able to show how deeply I care about and believe in this district and this community. What we have here is truly unique, and I am fully invested in continuing to protect what we have here in Pittsford, as well as helping the district keep moving forward, inspiring and preparing our students to be their best, do their best, and make a difference in the lives of others. Thank you, everyone who is listening, and I hope I've earned your vote again this year.
Thanks, Emily. So this concludes my portion of this evening's Meet the Candidate night. I want to thank the candidates for your thoughtful responses and for your willingness to serve in this capacity. Providing community residents the opportunity to meet and listen to different viewpoints of those that are asking to serve as board trustees is key to participating in our democratic process as an informed voter, and that's what you did this evening. I'll now turn it back over to Colleen Emmons, and again, my thanks to the PTSA. This is quite an undertaking to put all of this together, so I thank all of you for doing that.
Okay, just like everybody else, thank you so much for your time and your thoughtful answers. I mentioned it before, this is just a really important event for us. It's a huge role of PTA to be able to do that. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everybody online that tuned in. A little bit of housekeeping. The recording of tonight's event will be available on Pittsford Central School District's YouTube page within about 48 hours. So you'll be able to view it and rewatch it. And a few more thank yous. Actually, thank you to PCSD for the space and the technology support for today. Thank you to Interpretech for being here. Thank you to Joel, he's behind me right now, who is helping us with our live stream. And of course, Amy, thank you so much for being here. We're so lucky to have you. So the vote will be on May 20th at Calkins Road Middle School. It's a change this year. So spread the word. And thank you. Thank you for a great night.